Hello and welcome to Distraction, episode 14 with me, Zach, your host, otherwise known as GoPrandal on YouTube. And this is the show where I distract you with the things that have been distracting me in and out of quarantine. And this is going to be a fairly similar episode to one I did 2 weeks ago. And this episode is about sustaining the Black Lives Matter movement, not just having it being a fad on the internet. I'm going to get more into that after this short intro. And then at the end of the episode, like normal, I have got some suggestions and just a little topic that I'll also talk about. But I just wanted to start off by saying that the majority of this episode, I wanted to talk about how we sustain the support for the Black Lives Matter movement. There's been loads and loads of Insta posts showing how long other protests have lasted in the past, and I didn't realise how long they've lasted for like several weeks and months even. And because the way that it's sort of taught to me, especially when you think of the example of like Martin Luther King, to me it was always taught in school of Martin Luther King made a speech and he solved racism. Then one person, obviously it was one person he didn't solve, he didn't convert, and then they killed him, and then racism was solved, and that's it. That's sort of the narrative that we were taught, because I can't remember being taught anything after that of any movement. I might be totally wrong. You might be sat there thinking that's wrong. I was taught about it, blah blah blah, but I genuinely can't remember being taught about anything after that. So that's why I wanted to talk about maybe sustaining the movement and what you can do as an individual to make sure you're not just posting a few posts on Instagram this week and never thinking about it again, which even I can be guilty of. So I'm not trying to be like all high and mighty. This is something I'm trying to do, and hopefully we can all try to hopefully we can all try to be doing. The one thing I did want to start off with, which might not be interesting to anyone but people who really are interested in social media, but so Twitter have always stated that they have about 100 million active users, but the most liked tweet from 2017 was 4.3 million likes, and that's been the most liked tweet till now. And it's not the one Ellen did. The one Ellen did is now 17th most liked, but that like has 4.3 million views. And in the past 2 weeks, with videos of police brutality and stories on Twitter about the Black Lives Matter movement, we've seen consistent 500k, 1 million, 1.5 million likes on like 6 posts in a row. And that might not sound like much, but it really does show that you'd often see one of the, like, I'd probably see one of them maybe a month on Twitter. I'd very rarely see things that had a million likes, and now I'm seeing them daily, if not multiple times a day. So I think that just shows how far that this movement is going, even on social media, and social media is the best way for this movement to handle itself, because if you use the mainstream media, it's just no good at all, because they all have their own, what's the word? They all have their own narratives that they're pushing. But yeah, so I have like three subsections that I'm going to go through. So I've seen on social media some people confused, and many think it's just violence happening. Lots of Tories and lots of other people are like, oh, people are just rioting. So I wanted to start off saying like what the riots have actually accomplished for people who are trying to dismiss them, saying that it's just random acts of violence. So the riots in America have actually accomplished having the 4 officers fired for the murder of George Floyd, and at least one of them being tried with second-degree murder. I'm not sure about the other three, but I'm sure that they're all in police custody now. The University of Minneapolis cancelled their contract with the police, and that was like a massive deal. I'm not quite sure the specifics of it, but I know that was huge. The US embassies across Africa, like almost all of them, condemned the police brutality in America, which is sort of unheard of for embassies to talk against their government. Local bus companies in New York City refused to help or transport police and those arrested by the police in the riots, which I think is a fantastic use of power from the side of the bus companies. The officers who tased and pulled the people out the car, do you remember that video? There was two people heading home from work, and it was past the curfew, so two police officers tased them in the car and pulled them out. They've both been arrested. All of this, I'm sure, is due to the videos being on Twitter and millions of people seeing them. Confederate monuments have been removed in Atlanta, absolutely just taken down, and in like 6 other states there's been orders of them to be taken down, but they haven't quite done it yet. There were so many different states I didn't need to list them all. There's so many different examples of it, which is fantastic. California prosecutors are starting a campaign to stop accepting police union money. So again, I don't know the specifics, but basically the California prosecutors obviously get money from different sources, maybe some from the government, then some from charitable donations, and obviously we're getting a lot of money from the police union, and they've stopped that, so they have no ties to this union, and they have no they don't exactly have to do them any favours from now on. Los Angeles announced $100 million fund cut from the police department, which is going to be reinvested into more community projects, which I think is the biggest change to come from the riots. And also, just in general, how many police vehicles have been neutralised, we don't know. How many people have been politicised, we don't know. And how many new relationships of trust have been formed, we don't know. But we do know that any that have is all fantastic, and there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of examples of all of these things. So I got those stats and facts off at Spring Magca. I will link it below. Like I said, whatever I talk about, I always link it below. And I got lots of this off Instagram posts. But yeah, so I got all those fantastic things that the riots have accomplished from that account. But I think that was important just because a lot of people, I have been seeing on Facebook, some of my friends even saying that people don't understand what the riots have been accomplishing. So now you know, there's a few examples to spit back out in Facebook comments. The next thing I want to talk about is what is the ongoing Black Lives Matter movement campaigning for? Which I think a lot of people don't really understand. They know it was a result of George Floyd's death, or in the UK, they sort of know it's just to support what's going on in America, but I don't think they know the basics. So, at Simple Politics on Instagram made a post, and I'm going to elaborate on that now. So, in the US, the ongoing campaigns are heavily focused on upcoming elections, and they have three main aims. They want to vigorously engage communities in the electoral process. They want to educate people about the candidates and the issues that impact them the most. They want to promote voter registration and the amount of Gen Z and the black community and its allies. So obviously voting is one of the best ways to get people out of office. It's the best way to get things changed. And it's the same in England, where when you look at it, I think the American voting system is more broken than ours, but you'd be surprised how little of the population actually votes to change like the whole government's plans. So that's a really big thing in America. That's what they're campaigning for. That's what they're trying to promote at the minute. Is the easiest way for change is to vote. So I don't imagine I have any American listeners, or maybe some people know some American friends or family, but that's what they're going for. And then obviously education and research into the systematic racism of the US and UK. That's like obviously the overarching theme of why they are campaigning. And in the UK, this is obviously more important to everyone who's probably listening to this. The UK have no upcoming votes, but much of the movement is about awareness as well as highlighting issues in the agendas of those in charge and in the media. So they are trying. Many campaigns are going on. There's many campaigns going on. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. There's many campaigns going on in England for the Black Lives Matter movement, and the main aims of some of these movements are the government response to the impact on black people of COVID-19, because they had much higher rates of infection, disproportionate economic hardships compared to those who aren't black, those who aren't minorities, and it's been the same forever. It's not just with COVID-19. I was listening to the Scrubs podcast with Donald and Zach, and Donald talks about some of the reasons why the black community has high rates of infection and why they have a disproportionate economic hardship. And I'll link the episode below, and he goes into a really, really powerful story of, he talks about on the show as well how as a black person you wouldn't want to walk into a hospital where everyone is a different colour to you, and you just feel like the outsider, and you're going there to get cared for, you're going there to get fixed. And obviously in America and the UK, the sort of systematic racism that they are looked down upon. Yeah, I was like backtracking. No, they are looked down upon, and they do have disproportionate economic hardship because they may be less likely to get jobs. They may have to live in certain areas which are poorer areas, which means they don't get the same amount of funding. And I have friends, and I really don't get into that, but I have friends who think they like got given cars on the 17th. They always had school meals paid for by the mum and dad. They always had money at the weekends. And they always say that we all had the same opportunity. We all went to the same school. And me going to the same school as some of my other white friends, I can tell you how they had such an easier life and had a much bigger economic advantage. So you can't even imagine the disproportionate disadvantage that some black kids and minorities and obviously some white people, but it's much, much less common. But yeah, so that's why the UK are campaigning, as well as the Justice for Belly Mujunga. I'm so sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but that is the lady, the transport worker who was spat in the face by someone who had COVID-19, and she ended up dying from it. So some of the campaigns are calling for her, the person who spat at her, to be arrested. It was murder. And I'm not sure, I shouldn't really say, but there was a different instance of this happening where I think someone spat at a white man, if not a politician, and the person who spat at him did get arrested, even though he didn't end up dying of COVID-19, whereas it was just totally forgotten for this lady, and the person got away scot-free, and she died and left her daughter behind, and it was really sad. It was all in the news. You can go and research it. But that is another reason for why we are campaigning in England, and also just for the support of any black people fighting for liberation all across the UK, all across the world, really. But yeah, so that's why the Black Lives Matter movement, that is what they're campaigning for. Again, some people may have been a little bit confused, and probably not the people listening to this, but you'd be surprised when you go on Facebook. Very surprised at how many racist, air quote, friends that I actually had on Facebook, especially from school. And I don't want this to sound classist or anything, but it's mainly the ones that either peaked in secondary school or had kids at 15, and are always on Instagram at the weekends doing balloons in their cars in Tesco car park. But yeah, I'm sure this isn't surprising to anyone. Everyone will be going on Facebook at the minute and Twitter and being like, hashtag all lives matter, cunt. But these are just some points I wanted to throw in. I just want everyone to remember to not believe the media. I actually had a really, really interesting conversation with one of my friends this morning. She sent me a link to a documentary, and it's completely fucked me up. I'm not going to get into it on this podcast because I don't want the FBI to fucking take me down. But it's basically about how the media have been lying to us, and we all know they have. And it's the ways in which they do lie to us and they manipulate the information. So you just need to remember that in a few weeks' time, I have no doubt in my mind that they'll be showing black faces protesting and not the white people on the beach when they're reporting about a spike in cases in the UK. And it is important that we remember that the clips on Twitter, they don't have any context, whether that be the police brutality cases or the cases of police getting beaten by protesters. But I am going to go out on a limb with evidence from other areas that it is the police instigating it. I'm not trying to say, oh, well, maybe we should calm down because I think the police... people might be mean to the police and maybe they deserve it. No, I'm sure the police are instigating it and they're doing so many dodgy things to incite violence. But you do have to remember, just as a overarching warning, that we do have no context for these clips, and that's more for the side of when people beat the police and then the media tries to say, look at these violent protesters beating the shit out of these policemen. They probably deserve it. For some of the stories I've heard from some of my close friends, they definitely deserve it, to be honest. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, because I forgot to say that also, talking about the media, if you were interested in the Madeleine McCann thing that came up this week, or if you give more attention to that than you did for the Black Lives Matter movement, don't be a twat. It's obviously a gimmick to try and point the English audience, the English public towards, whoa, look, we almost found Maddie McCann. No, just ignore it. They're trying not to let you know about all of the protests and the movements that are happening in America and England. It's a stupid tactic, and I hope it didn't work. All my friends are clever enough for it not to have been worked on. But again, the racist friends in Facebook, it probably worked on them because they're probably making statuses like, whoa, bloody hell, look at this. Yeah. So I was going to say, and then we can talk about the people that say, oh, but you want to abolish the police, but what are you going to do when you get burgled? Don't be a fucking idiot. So they say, who do we call? And they'll probably say, oh, lefty simps. But when we're discussing abolishing the police, we're discussing about dismantling the current order of the police. So the police, this is maybe more in America than England, they were never meant to do everything that they do. The system that they have in place, the point of police in the beginning was obviously to make arrests, to keep the community safe, but they're not to be riot police. They're not to go to the scenes of car crashes and help people in prisons. They're not there. They have 6 weeks training. They're not taught how to help people, how to be mental health advisors, and to try and give people a new path. They're just there to keep them there and keep them from killing each other. Well, if they are. So some people have suggested things like creating a real mental health care for people in prisons and violent neighbourhoods. Another idea is restorative justice or transformative justice, represent an alternative to courts and jails. And we've seen examples from this from hippie communes, the IRA, an anti-apartheid South African guerrilla movement, and they've experimented with community courts and spaces which are created, and they give accountability to the perpetrator, and the accountability is understood as a community issue, and its aim is to restore and transform everyone in the process, not just the perpetrator and the victim, but the whole community. And also the decriminalisation of almost every non-violent crime, especially weed-related charges. These things, we just need to take down the current system of policing. I hope I didn't explain that absolutely terribly, but that was supposed to be some examples of what we could introduce instead of having the current system of policing that we do now. Again, sorry if that was confusing. I'm still trying to work it all out in my head. So, the main reason I made this podcast, preventing burnout on the movement. On a personal level, identify your feelings and talk to a trusted confidant or a therapist or a friend. We do know that like a problem shared is a problem halved, and that's a really cheesy thing to say, but it's genuinely true. Especially in my first year of university, I was really struggling, and talking to people really helped. So if you're if you're like me and you're trying to be an ally to the movement, and you're trying to have all of this information gushing through, and you feel so guilty and blah de blah, you need to try and talk about it. You need to realize you can't do it all at once. I think next on the list, ironically, is make a list. Make a list of all the things you want to watch, all the things you want to do, all the questions you have. Don't try and answer and understand everything right now. It's an ongoing battle, and you will get better within time. Find healthy outlets of refreshment and fulfillment and relief. Don't constantly be on social media. I had to give social media up for a few days this week. Well, I tried, because being on social media constantly and seeing everything bombarded at you, we're not built for it, genuinely. Not that I have any background in like the human mind, but we're not built for constant seeing people brutalized in the streets, and also having people attack us and what we're thinking. Like if you are arguing with people on the internet, having them attack you for logical replies, we're honestly not built for it. And also learn when to stand in the front and do yell for what is important, and learn when to step back because you don't know what you're fucking talking about. This is the same with not just the Black Lives Matter movement, but for everything. That's why I took so long. I haven't really been posting on my social media, and I waited to research and make these podcasts because I didn't know and I wanted to research. Don't just go out and start yelling because you want your opinion to be heard. Just step back and physically research, so you know what you're talking about, and then you don't have to go after everyone and yell at them. I know for some people it feels like they morally have to, but if you change, instead of going after everyone you see who's being racist and yell at them, figure out a plan for the future where when someone says something like that in front of you, you know your logical response to that, where you know they can't dismantle it because you've just thought of the top of your head, if you know what I mean. This is something I try to do in lots of different scenarios where I know someone might not like what you're doing, so you have to try and come up with, not try and come up with, you know what you're doing is right, but you need to come up with a way of expressing that without maybe putting them down or trying to be like you're a stupid person. So from different physical ways, like I said, make a list of questions. Try and give donations. If you follow Chris Clemens on anything, he linked to some websites which are really cool, where they give out like 10 charities, and instead of you giving like $1 here, $1 there, $1 here, you send them like 20 quid, and they disperse it between 10 different charities on that page, and there's lots of different ones. So you don't need to make big donations. If you continuously make little donations to lots and lots of charities, I think that's absolutely fantastic. Obviously, you only do it if you can. Lots of uni students and poorer families obviously can't do that, but then you can do the other things. If you do book clubs or film clubs, or if you're like me, I try to watch one new film a week, and I also try to read one new book a month. That's just like a personal goal for me. So an easy fix there is, if I read 12 books a year, now I'll make sure 6 of them are from black or minority writers. And when I watch films, don't just sit and watch all the latest blockbusters. Don't sit and watch all the films made by little indie white kids. Try and branch out and get films from different directors. And I've got a whole list. I'm not sure many of my audience watch like film study videos, but one of the people I watch on YouTube, he's called Carsten Runquist, and he has give out a list of all different film critics on YouTube to follow, and you can watch them and get their opinion. So you're getting all different types of opinions, you're experiencing so many different types of art, and you're just getting different perspectives from everywhere. And I think that's just a fantastic thing to do, really. A very easy fix to be able to do, if you know what I mean. The thing I wrote here, which I quite liked, it was it makes an equal spread of white, black, and minorities who have produced the media texts that you are consuming. It's that easy. Like I said, I try and watch one new film a week, so that's what I'm going to start doing. Something to sort of go along with that lines is something I heard on the Hat Chat podcast, which is Hat Films, is Smith on that podcast. Not sure how many people watched that. He talked about the idea of travelling is the downfall of prejudice. I'm sure this is a famous quote from someone famous. But yeah, he said that travelling is the downfall of prejudice. And this is because the more you travel, again, the more experiences you get, you understand and see people's different way of life. And you understand where people are coming from and their beliefs a bit more easier when you're in their environment. This is something I've thought about for a while. I'm not sure this is the podcast to do it, but the whole, like, if you've done any media or social sciences in the past, you might have heard of the McDonaldization of society, which is the idea that Western culture is influencing the world, especially through the media, and everywhere's becoming the same. Like having a McDonald's in India and having a McDonald's in America is exactly the same. I think that is awful. Because I think that the world and humans haven't evolved to all believe the same thing, to all have the same society and culture. I think the point of different societies evolving, I'm not saying that some are better than others, I'm saying to respect everyone's culture. Everyone has evolved to have their culture, and yours is not better than anyone else's, because why the fuck would it be? But I think it's a real shame that in even a few generations' time, the whole gimmick of going to Thailand to find yourself after university may not be a thing, because it'll just be so similar to America, because they'll have installed so many of their values through the media to those people. And also I think lots of the way that lots of people disagree and have very, very big arguments across the globe is because I don't think we were made to understand everything. We can understand everything and we can respect everything, but we shouldn't all live the same way, is what I'm trying to say. I don't think we were expected to all live the same way, but we can easily respect and understand everyone's way of life. And if you've never travelled, or even going to university, and this isn't a dig at any of my friends who didn't go to university, but I've had this conversation before where when you go to university, even that gives you such a new perspective of people. It really changes you. It really gives you a new understanding of lots of different things, because I grew up with a predominantly white friendship group in working class area, maybe slightly middle class area of Stockton, went to a normal school, and that's about it. And I went to university and I met people from York, from Halifax, from north of Ireland. I met someone from Scotland. I met people, I had housemates. One was originally from Jamaica, one was from the Isle of Man, one's from Luxembourg. You meet people absolutely from all over, and you obviously you're all fairly similar, but you all have very specific differences, which are really, really interesting and fascinating. And like one of my favorite things about going to university was meeting these people and learning all these stories. And as you know, like with my videos and podcasts, one of the things I like to do is to tell stories and to tell different people's. But even just doing that, you begin to realise how different the world is, and especially how shit Britain is. And we really didn't do that much good, but we're fed the perceived idea that because we won World War II and that's all we learned about, that we actually had a much bigger positive impact on the world than what we did. But that's not true. And then when you start to meet people, especially like my friends over from Derry, you really find out that the British weren't that good. But yeah, so that's just what I wanted to say. That's a good way as well of sustaining the movement and maybe learning. If you're not into reading books and you have the ability to meet new people and to go travelling, that's probably the best way. And it's the same reason why it is a gimmick, and it is the cliche that if you go to Thailand after university, you do find yourself, because you realise everything that we've built in our society isn't the be all and end all sort of thing. And I think that's really important, and I think it would be a real shame if I had it my way, not to be like best of British, but if I had it my way, I really wouldn't have the McDonaldization of the media, of fast food restaurants, of shop chains. Like, I'd have all the countries to the best of their ability, sustaining on what they've got, importing of what they need, and then being able to travel and go to all these new places and find these fascinating things and not having to rely on, oh, I'm going to go to Spain, I know if I don't like anything, I'll just have a Mackey's. I don't know. I think it's a bit of a shame. But yeah, that is my segment on sustaining the Black Lives Matter movement. Hope it wasn't too confusing. I still find it very confusing, and I've been reading off my notes predominantly. But I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to do a few more minutes, but if that's all you were here for, that's the end of that. Thank you. The next thing I actually wanted to talk about, though, was a funny news story, just to lighten the mood a bit. It's a funny news story from Australia where two men were arrested for breaking into a house with machetes, and it turned out it was the wrong house, and they weren't trying to break in and murder anyone. Someone had hired them to live out a sexual fantasy where these people broke in and then stroked them with brooms, and then like that was a sexual fantasy, but they'd got the wrong house. So the people obviously called the police, and the police showed up, found the two people in the house, found the machetes in the car, and arrested them. But you just have to think, those people who were breaking into the house must have been like, wow, these people are really into this. Like, they're pretending to call the police. They're screaming for us to get out of their house. They're really getting involved in this fantasy. But yeah, I thought that was absolutely fucking hilarious. My recommendation this week, which, again, after, like I said, talked to my friend about that documentary, which broke me, everything that's going on in the world broke me. And then last night, I finally got a chance to watch The Lighthouse. And that's not a good film to watch right now. It's a story of two men who man a lighthouse on, like, basically a deserted island, where they're marooned, detached from the rest of the world, and sort of detached by reality, and they become a bit disillusioned of what is real and what is not. And it's very similar to sort of what's going on at the minute. And I don't think it was meant to be a horror. I don't think it was meant to be scary. But I finished that film, and I was just shitting myself scared. I didn't really sleep that well last night. I was just like, that was just too heavy. Fantastic film though. Definitely go and give it a watch. Really, really good. Probably Willem Dafoe's best role I've ever seen him in. Robert that's Robin Patterson, who's soon to be Batman. Robin Battenbat's another one of his fantastic roles. I really liked him in Good Time as well. I'm not even mentioning the other one. But yeah, absolutely fantastic film. Whereas when I've talked about films like mid-90s and their aesthetic of their aspect ratio being more of a gimmick, which it totally is in that film, but that film's also got its own problems as well. The Lighthouse's aesthetic isn't a gimmick. It really adds to the story, and the lighting especially is a tool in the storytelling. It wouldn't be able to be told the same without it. I have it on Blu-ray because it got released like yesterday on Blu-ray, but I think it's for rent on Amazon Prime on like Sky or something like that. So if you did want to watch it, that's my recommendation for this week. And finally, I've been starting to watch a bit more. No, I've been starting to use my GoPrandle Instagram account a bit more, and that's the Instagram account where I follow lots of like naturey, outdoorsy sort of things. And one of the things on there was Chester Zoo. Now, I've never really been a fan of zoos. I've always found them like they're taking something away from the animals, like they're being a bit detrimental to the animal species. But because of COVID lockdown, 97% of their funding has come from ticket sales, and because obviously of lockdown, they aren't getting that, and they need something like 1.5 million a month just to feed and to properly take care of their animals. And I was sort of on the fence of, so there's different things you can do. You can like donate, you can adopt an animal for like 45, 65 or £90, and you get like a little certificate of adoption, you get like a little cuddly toy, and then you pay that much, you get your name on a plaque or something like that. But I've always been under the impression that zoos were holding animals and they were stopping them living their lives. Like SeaWorld, totally against SeaWorld. SeaWorld is not doing anything for preservation. But Chester Zoo seems determined on their website, at least. I haven't found any other sources like going against this, that they are preserving animal lives and they're preventing extinction on like thousands of species. And basically, if this shuts down, that some of these species could die out, and they even have an international program, especially with their penguins, where they have penguins from all over Europe, all over the world, mating at their zoo. And if any of my friends listen to this, it's only my friends that listen to this. If you're listening to this and you maybe know something about this, or you just have an opinion on it yourself, please give me a message, because I am thinking about donating or sponsoring a species. You can only sponsor a species. It's not like sponsor Fred, it's like sponsor lions. And I am thinking about doing it because I do think it's important, and I don't want the zoo to go under. But from being against zoos for so long, maybe I've just forgotten, and I've got a bit into the mindset of, oh, I'd like to sponsor a lion, but I really think they're doing good. If someone knows something against that, like I'm saying, please come and tell me, because if not, I think I'm going to do that. And if you don't have anything against that, and you also think the preservation of animals is important as well, I'll link it below again with everything else, but go and give a small donation or sponsor an animal yourself. That's Chester Zoo. I've just seen it all over my Instagram, and I think it would be a real shame if the things that they're saying are going to happen do happen. But yeah, that is the end of episode 14. Thank you so much for listening. I've been your host, Zach. All my socials are linked below: Letterboxd, Instagram, Tumblr, if you're into that. Please come back next week. Please like if you liked this podcast. Please subscribe. Follow me on Spotify, and I will see you next week. Thank you.